What's going on, everybody? Welcome to this special interview here on On3. I'm your host, Nick Costco, and with me today is New York Times bestselling author Gary Myers, author of the new Brady versus Belichick, the Dynasty Debate book, which is due out on September 16th, wherever you can get your novels and nonfiction, of course. So, Gary, first of all, thanks for joining me today. I'm really eager to talk to you. This is always a fascinating debate. It's been going on pretty much since Tom Brady left the New England Patriots, went to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. It's always like, all right, who did it better, Belichick or Brady? I feel like this debate is not going to stop anytime soon, considering where the two are at in their careers. But before we even dive into this heavyweight fight, so to speak, I would imagine you caught wind of Bill Belichick's North Carolina debut. So I wanted to start there because that's been a huge talking point over the course of the summer, how he would adapt to college football. Didn't work out on Monday night, 48-14 loss to TCU, but did you anticipate something like that? What were your overall, I guess, general thoughts on Bill Belichick now starting his college career in coaching?
Well, I thought that they rode the emotion early on, obviously, on their first series and went down for a touchdown. The fans were going nuts. And, at that point, you said, well, maybe they're a little bit better than everybody anticipated. He's got, I think, 70 new players, which is nearly impossible to transition to in such a short period of time. No preseason in college football, and how can these players possibly gel as a unit when there's they're probably just learning everybody's name. Did I think they were going to get blown out by over 30 points? No. I guess it was the worst point differential of Belichick's career. It's just going to take time there. But what's interesting to me, Nick, is how everybody is so quick to jump off the bandwagon. The game has passed Belichick by. He's not going to be able to adapt to college, this and that. He's a really smart guy. And if he can get the personnel aspect down, meaning, master the transfer portal and being able to figure out the NIL, see the 5-star recruits coming out of high school, if he can get the players in there, then he's going to coach them up and they're going to be really good. It's just the landscape has changed so much just in the last year or two that it's driving coaches out of college football, like Nick Saban and Chip Kelly went to work. He resigned as a head coach at UCLA, went to work as offensive coordinator at Ohio State, and now he's back in the NFL as an offensive coordinator with the Raiders. He wanted no part of this stuff. And Belichick, who claims it was his dream to always coach in college, has decided to dive in at probably like the wrong time because there's so many changes and nobody really knows, how to master this stuff yet.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be a fascinating exercise to see how it matriculates over the course of a full season, and if he actually does finish out that 5-year contract he signed ahead of the summer. So before we go way back in time, at the start of this Belichick versus Brady debate, which, it wasn't a debate back then. It was like, oh, Belichick and Brady, you can't break those two up before a 2-decade partnership ultimately did end. So I'm curious about how you got this admission from Bill Belichick in the book. That's coming out in 2 weeks, but he did say to you that Brady leaving New England for Tampa Bay was, quote, the right decision. It just seems like it was pretty much impossible for that either the relationship or the partnership to continue after that 2019 season. Of course, the early playoff exit to the Tennessee Titans, but I guess was it a summation of like, this is as far as we could take it. We need to hit a total reset, and Tom Brady being here is not going to make any sense. Were you surprised that Belichick was like, yeah, it was the right decision? At that point, we just knew that he was going to move on.
Yeah, because it was kind of an admission on his part, Nick, that he had failed Brady because he couldn't put the players around him to win a Super Bowl or compete for a Super Bowl anymore. But, it goes deeper than that because he didn't want him back. It wasn't so much that he was, doing the right thing by Brady by saying, we're going to let you go, Tom, so you can go finish up your career with a win, and why don't you go play in Tampa? He wasn't, giving up Brady other than the fact that he thought the end was right around the corner, and he's always believed in giving up on a player, letting a player go a year too early than a year too late. And so he didn't want to pay him what Tom wanted after taking under market contracts all those years. But he was probably right also. In evaluating the personnel situation. If you remember that year in 2019, The Patriots lost a home game to Miami in the last weekend of the regular season that cost them a first-round bye and forced them into the wild card round at home against Tennessee. And they just looked like they didn't want to be there that game. And it turns out Brady's last pass was a pick six returned by a former Patriot, Logan Ryan, for a touchdown. The game was already out of reach at that point. Yeah. But, I was a little taken back by him admitting that, the personnel kind of sucked at that point, and not even Brady could win with it. And I think the biggest mistake he made when you really evaluated it, he didn't have a succession plan in place after he traded Garoppolo. Whether Tom forced the trade of Garoppolo or not, you hear a lot of different things. But even so, after Garoppolo left in 2017, Belichick didn't really make plans like, okay, who's next in line? If he thought Brady was coming to an end, not to have a viable alternative or a succession plan in place, I think it was just another indication that Belichick's, personnel acumen had taken a big hit.
And along those same lines, because Brady had that instant success, I think that's what really sparked this debate. The debate was starting when they separated. It's like, all right, who's going to have more success? And of course, Belichick went out and got Cam Newton, which looked great for about a week and a half, and then it kind of all faltered.
And he didn't sign him until June.
Right.
How do you bring when Brady leaves in March and you had a feeling he was going to leave, how do you wait until June and then bring in a guy who everybody knew, he was running on fumes at that point, and he wasn't going to be the answer.
Right. And then you look forward to 2021. Of course, they make the playoffs with Mac Jones, but then ultimately that fell apart, which led to, to use this word, the demise of Belichick in New England. So that 2020 season, weird for all kinds of reasons, of course. That's the COVID season. No fans, barely any fans in the stands. But Brady ends up winning a Super Bowl that first year in Tampa. Now, I think a lot of people could see that that was a possibility, considering he was still not in the prime of his career, but he still had enough juice to operate a team at quarterback. They surrounded a lot of talent, which didn't happen the previous year in New England, and maybe not to an extent even the year they last won a Super Bowl in 2018. So because Belichick admitted that to you, where he made the right decision, that Brady made the right decision to leave and go to Tampa, did you sense any ill will from Belichick towards Brady? It's like, I can't believe this guy just won without me. We did it 6 times. We, made the Super Bowl, 9 times, 10 times, whatever it was, and then he just goes, "Oh my God, this guy just won without me."
I did ask Bill that question, how he felt about Tom winning, and he said he was happy for him. The interesting thing to me here, Nick, is when I evaluate who should get the credit, and as I discussed throughout the course of the entire book, I make a point, and you may or may not agree with this. I think what they did separately is irrelevant to the argument. Now, there's no question that Belichick has yet to prove, either before Brady or after Brady, they can win without Brady.
Right.
But he proved he can win with him. And it's not like, and this is what I tell people, it's not like Tom Brady was the first pick in the draft. He wasn't Peyton Manning or John Elway, that, okay, he's going to step in, considered to be a generational talent. And Belichick, rode the coattails of Brady to 6 championships. This guy was a 6th-round pick. So we have to give Belichick some credit for drafting him, keeping him as a 4th-string quarterback, keeping him as the starter once Drew Bledsoe was healthy in 2001. They won that first Super Bowl with a running game and defense until Brady won the Super Bowl on that last drive in regulation to get him in position for Vinatieri's field goal. So I think there's a lot of recency bias involved here in evaluating the two of them. I don't think there's any question that, it's divided up into 2 dynasties, probably 2001 to 2009, 10 if you want, and then 11 to 19. And I think that you can make a case that Belichick, through the first 3 Super Bowls, was a dominant figure. I can't say he was indispensable, because Brady was indispensable too. They wouldn't have done this with Drew Bledsoe.
Right.
But I think it was more of a Belichick-driven team early on. And I think the turning point was in 2007 when they went undefeated and Tom threw 50 touchdown passes. And all of a sudden we went, well, this guy went from being a top 5 quarterback to he might be the greatest of all time. And then from that point until when Tom left in 2019, I don't think there's any question that Tom was the driving force behind their success.
It's interesting you bring that up because I was going to dive into that draft day where he was picked. Everyone knows the story, 199th pick, 6th-round quarterback, and they were 5-11 that year. And I don't know if Brady would ever sniff the field had Bledsoe not gotten hurt. Everyone always plays that what-if game. So I guess in your argument, and I'm glad you break it up into two separate dynasties, and as well as, well, you can't really do this debate if you look at afterwards or pre-Belichick Brady. You have to look at that sequence of 20 years where, okay, who was a little bit more responsible for all the success. So when they go 5-11, all of a sudden the injury happens, and I'll get into more of the injury backstory in a second. But when you evaluate that moment in time, and you did write in the book that Belichick was worried that if he can't turn around this team in year 2, he might get fired, regardless if it's Brady or Bledsoe under center. So do you look at that as like, maybe Belichick has the one up on Brady there, considering, well, I'm the one who picked him, and he happened to be the one I put in after Drew went down with that injury, so I should get at least more credit for that.
Yeah, and I think if he ever would make that argument, which he'll never talk about stuff like that, but I think that's only logical. Right. I mean, Brady might not have been drafted. He came within one round of slipping through the entire draft. And Nick, what would have happened if he was picked by Cleveland instead of Spurgeon Wynn or some of the other 5 teams that picked a quarterback, in addition to Cleveland? Chad Pennington was the best of the bunch, and he went in the first round. And, he might have turned out to be a really special quarterback, but he had a bunch of injuries. I think we have to give Belichick his due for picking him and keeping him around. Now, all that being said, Bledsoe's injury was the best thing. Now, nobody ever wants anybody to get hurt. But Bledsoe's injury was the best thing to happen to Belichick. I was told that he came out of training camp in 2001 wanting to start Brady in the season opener at Cincinnati. But because Robert Kraft, against Belichick's advice, had just signed Bledsoe to a $103 million 10-year contract in the offseason, and because of what Belichick went through by running off Bernie Kosar in Cleveland, he didn't have it in him to go through it again with Bledsoe, who was extremely popular in New England, to put in a guy that, unless you're a big college football fan, that most fans around the NFL hadn't heard of in Brady, even though he had a really good career the last couple of years. When he finally got on the field at Michigan, he was 20-5. His last game against Alabama, he threw for 4 touchdowns and nearly 400 yards in the Orange Bowl. But even so, taking all that into consideration, when Bledsoe gets hurt, Patriot fans were thinking the season was over. They didn't think they witnessed when Mo Lewis hit Bledsoe. They didn't think they were witnessing, we're going to start a dynasty now. It was like, how long is Bledsoe going to be out? And are they going to be, 3-7 by the time he comes back? Instead, Brady played better than Bledsoe had for Belichick in the 2000 season and the first 2 games of 2001. That I think it was a relatively easy decision for him to stick with Brady when Bledsoe was healthy 2 months later.
It is fascinating that you bring up that Belichick, and just correct me if I'm wrong, but Belichick did want to start Brady that week 1, but he's like, I don't have the heart to do it because I don't want to ruin another guy's career, reputation, wherever the case may be.
I think he was more worried about himself, that when he benched Kosar, then inevitably or later on he cut him and Kosar went to Dallas. The fans wanted in Cleveland, Bernie was a local guy, so that added to it. But the fans in Cleveland wanted Belichick out of there right then.
Right.
Now, he went and made the playoffs the next year and won a playoff game against Parcells and the Patriots. But when it came time to, I really want to play Brady over Bledsoe to start the opener, but do I want to go through this again? Now, he didn't tell me this, but I don't think it's logical to assume that if you connect the dots on this, he was going to let Bledsoe play himself out of a job. And how long the leash would have been, only Belichick knows. If he had gotten off to a 0-4 start, he might have pulled the plug right then. As it turns out, Bledsoe has this horrific injury, is out for 2 months. Brady plays well, not lights out because they're relying on the defense, but he's playing more like Belichick wanted his quarterback to play. He's taking care of the ball for the most part, and he's managing the game plan. and letting not putting the defense in a bad position. So it worked out perfectly for Belichick. Again, he wasn't sitting there on the sideline saying, "Wow, if Mo Lewis just hits Bledsoe, and shears a blood vessel in his chest, then he's going to be out for a couple of months, and I'll be able to play who I want." He wasn't thinking like that, but I'm sure he had concern for Bledsoe as a human being.
Yeah.
But as far as managing his team, he couldn't have written a better script.
And part of that script is the Bledsoe injury. And you mentioned Mo Lewis a couple of times, who, again, played his whole career with the Jets over a decade. But I found it fascinating that you had a little it's almost like a little aside in the book that that's coming out, that he has had very little interaction with his former teammates, the franchise itself. He's basically become, as you put it, a recluse since that day, where he basically is, I guess Jet fans basically say, you know what, you're the reason why the Patriots have a dynasty, that the Jets can never beat the Patriots, and why we're down on hard times just because you made a big hit on a guy and he happened to get more hurt than anybody anticipated. How did you dive into that? Did Mo talk to you directly as far as, this really stinks and it's still like this to this day? What was your whole takeaway with your conversations with Mo Lewis?
It wasn't really an aside in the book. It was chapter 1. I really played that up because first, Mo has really been invisible in terms of doing interviews.
Yeah.
And he hates the fact that he's associated with that play, and Jet fans, a certain segment of them, blame him for the beginning of the Brady era because it was his hit that knocked out Bledsoe. And obviously Brady turned out to be a much better quarterback than Bledsoe was. And Mo's pretty bitter about this. He had an excellent career. He's an all-pro. He made a bunch of Pro Bowls. Probably one of the 2 or 3 best linebackers the Jets have ever had, except if you mention Mo Lewis, any Jets fan, they're not going to tell you that. They're going to say, oh, he's the guy that knocked out Bledsoe and got Brady on the field. And, look at the misery that Brady put us through for 20 years. It's not fair, right? I mean, the guy was an excellent player and he was just doing his job. And the really interesting thing and I tracked him down. It took some doing. I tracked him down and I had to talk him into talking to me when I got him on the phone because he was very reluctant, but then he was really good explaining his feelings. He wants nothing to do with that. And as he told me that it was really Bledsoe's fault, and he's not wrong about that. He said he should have slid, or he should have run out of bounds. He said he just signed a $100 million contract. He goes, to be what? To be a pocket quarterback, not to be a running quarterback. Now, I said, Mo, he was just trying to win the game. It was 3rd down, and he needed 10 yards, and there was no open receivers. There was no outlet for him to throw to, so he just took off. His mistake wasn't running. His mistake was not running out of bounds when he saw Mo coming. And believe me, I mean, Drew's a big guy.
Yeah.
And Mo is a big guy, and that was a train wreck right on the field. And players on the Jets sidelines, which was the opposite sideline because this happened on the Patriots sideline, told me they can hear the hit. Now remember, the width of the field is 53.3 yards.
Yeah.
They heard that hit as if they were standing next to it. It was that loud. And players on the Patriots sidelines, I mean, it sounded like somebody got shot because the impact was so horrific. I'll tell you one other thing.
Yeah.
And I was at that game.
Mm-hmm.
So Drew comes back for the next series, and nobody knows what's going on internally. But he's in the huddle, and he's having trouble remembering the plays and calling the plays, and he needed some teammates to help him. And a couple of his teammates went and told the coaches. I think they might have gone 3 and out on that series. They went and told the coaches, there's something not right with Drew. So they immediately diagnosed him with a concussion. And that's when Brady went in for the next series. It wasn't until they were in the locker room after the game that his blood pressure was acting different than if it was a concussion. I can't remember if it was going up or going down, but that set up a red flag to the doctors. And they said, Drew, we're going to get your uniform off and you're going to the hospital. He goes, no, I'm just going to go home. If I'm not feeling better in the morning, I'll do what you say. And they said, no, you're coming with us. And he nearly died in the ambulance on the way to the hospital in Boston. His brother was in the ambulance with him and told him like 2 or 3 years later that he had blanked out for a short period of time. And Drew's brother thought he had died.
Wow. when you look at Mo Lewis and that whole incident, again, Bledsoe, thank God, obviously he survived. He went on to finish his career at a couple more teams, Bills always included, was productive at a time until he retired, of course, and, doing well now. I know he has no ill will for the most part, I think he opened up in a documentary with ESPN a couple years ago. But as far as Mo Lewis is concerned, do you feel there's any chance of any sort of reconciliation with the team or with the fans? I mean, I feel like Mo Lewis, as you mentioned, hard to track him down. You're not going to see him at the Meadowlands anytime soon, but is there any chance of that later in life?
Yeah. You know what? I think this is ESPN did a story on my Mo Lewis chapter, and it got some pretty good traction here in New York. And once the book comes out and people in the Jets organization either read it or, a friend of a friend tells Woody Johnson about Mo Lewis's feelings or whatever, I would not be shocked if the Jets reached out to him and tried to bring him back into the family. I'm surprised it hasn't happened to this point because, again, Mo didn't do anything wrong.
Right.
He was just trying to help the Jets win the game. And in reality, he did help him win the game because if he didn't tackle Bledsoe at that point, he might have gotten the first down, and then who knows what would have happened. So, I mean, I would hope that his quotes in my book might be the impetus for the Jets to say, it's time we reach out to this guy, put his number up in the Ring of Honor at MetLife, because he really does deserve that.
Right.
And the one regret I have in writing the book was I did not contact the Jets, and I really should have. Like, why isn't Mo in the Ring of Honor? But, there are a bunch of players, and I can't, off the top of my head, I can't name them to you, but, who probably deserve to be in the Jets Ring of Honor who aren't there. And you can probably say the same about lots of teams around the league that, and this thing only started, I think, in 2010 when they opened the stadium. Neither the Giants nor Jets had a Ring of Honor. I think it was just Joe Namath's jersey up at the old Giant Stadium. So it's been 15 years, but I would say the time is right now to try to extend, like I say, an olive branch out to Mo and bring him back.
Yeah, and this could be the moment to do so. So I wanted to pivot over to Tom Brady Sr., who's been very outspoken. We know how Brady's family operates, and Brady Sr. has been very defensive of his son. But he mentioned that the vibe he got from Belichick, as far as the relationship with his son was concerned, was Belichick was all about expectation, not so much appreciation, if there was any appreciation at all. I guess if you talk to Belichick now, he does have that appreciation, but it never came across that way, even throughout the entire 20 years, winning 6 Super Bowls, so on and so forth. What were your conversations like with Tom Brady Sr.? And I guess that appreciation versus expectation, did that ultimately, was that the final straw when it came to the breakup leading into 2020?
Yeah, Nick, that's a great question. I think if you notice some of the things that Belichick said about Brady when he retired, and then I was at the ceremony in Foxborough a year ago, June, when they retired his number, and he was just effusive in his praise of Brady. If he had said 15% of that stuff to Tom when he was still playing for him, to let him know how much he appreciated him, the ending in New England might have been different. But as far as Tom Sr. is concerned, I always felt, and I've gotten to know him really well over the years. I did a book, Brady versus Manning, in 2015, that I talked to Tom Sr. for extensively. And again, for this book, I've always felt that what he says is what Tom, the quarterback, is thinking, but Tom can't say himself. And Tom Sr. says it. Now, I don't necessarily think that Tom tells his father, this is what I need you to say, but I think his father knows what Tom is thinking and says it for him. And he just felt like, considering what he had accomplished, that he was not appreciated. He played an AFC championship game in 2017 against Jacksonville. During the week, he got his hand cut in practice, and it was a deep gash, and they weren't sure he was going to be able to play. And Tom wound up, ripping off the bandage before the game because he didn't feel he had enough flexibility in his hand. And he led a fourth quarter comeback. Jacksonville kind of blew the game, but Tom led a fourth quarter comeback. And after the game, someone had asked Belichick, how he felt about, Tom, the guts of the cards that he showed, his mangled hand. And I'm not sure if I have this exactly right, but it was something to the extent like, we're not going to give him the Purple Heart, something like that. Something really condescending, like give me a break. It was only his hand. Didn't have his knee cut off or didn't have his leg amputated.
Right.
He really minimized what Tom went through to play in that game, and I know that really upset the Brady family. That's how Belichick was, and it just reached a point. 2017, 18, in that period of time where Tom had continued to take under market contracts, and the money he was saving the Patriots under the cap was not being put to good use by Belichick. And he finally reached the breaking point of being scolded like a rookie, which Belichick never changed his approach with Brady, and being underpaid when he looked around the league and saw what other quarterbacks were making. And Belichick didn't want to give him a 2-year, $50 million contract to stay, and that's exactly what Tampa gave him. He knew in the summer of 19 that he was done. He put his house on the market, tried to downplay that somewhat, but when a guy puts his house on the market, he's not staying with that team much longer. And then, combined with the fact that it got out that the Patriots amended his contract to let him be a free agent after the season with no opportunity to put the franchise tag on him. It seems so obvious looking back on it that 2019 was going to be his final year. But during that period of time, nobody wanted to believe, Brady's only going to wear one uniform. He'll never leave New England. And I felt once Joe Montana switched teams, all bets were off. Anybody, if that happened, and you look at the list of Hall of Famers now that have played for more than one team, it's the rarity that a guy only plays for one team.
Yeah, and it's funny that Brady, I guess he one-upped Joe Montana because Montana gets the Chiefs to a championship game, and then, of course, Brady wins a Super Bowl with Tampa Bay in his first year. It's funny you mentioned that late time period of, where they weren't quite in alignment when it came to that expectation versus appreciation moniker, and that was in 2017 where they lost the Super Bowl to Philadelphia, but that was sandwiched in between 2 Super Bowl titles the year before and the year after. The comeback against Atlanta, of course, a lackadaisical, if we're going to use that term, for the Super Bowl win over the Rams. But it's interesting because there was, politics and football have been more aligned over the last 10 years. So that whole era of the Patriots, I'm not going to say it was defined by this, but there was obviously President Donald Trump's support from Brady, from Belichick, from Kraft, and I think they've all been, I guess, on that side of the fence when it comes to the support for the current president over the last 10 plus years at this point. You wrote a lot about how that was within the locker room dynamic, but it just seemed like head coach, owner, and quarterback were all aligned off the field, but it didn't quite translate on the field because everyone was like, well, I like this guy better than this guy, but this guy doesn't like me, so on and so forth. And then you mentioned the whole Devin McCourty equation of it where, he was obviously outspoken about, hey, some of the guys don't like this, and he went up to Belichick about something like that in terms of the Presidential Medal of Freedom,
right.
The political support for President Trump, in addition to or instead of the other candidates as well. So when you, I guess, combine all of that together, that dynamic didn't quite go to on the field. Why was that? How come those guys were able to, I guess, mesh off the field, but it didn't quite work on the field? Did everything's kind of bleed over and just become, I guess I want to say, did it become a mess despite all that success?
Well, I'm trying to remember, Nick, whether the MAGA hats showed up in Brady's locker in 2015 or right before the election in 2016. I just don't recall. I probably have the correct time period in the book. But in any event, once attention was drawn to that, and Brady was given that hat by Kraft, and I'll get to the Kraft relationship in a second.
2015 it first appeared, by the way.
Okay. Okay, that makes sense. Tom took the hat down. Take it off. I mean, I remember seeing it. It was just on the shelf behind him in his locker. And, once he started getting some pushback on it, he got rid of it. Tom had a friendship with Trump. He never came out and endorsed him politically. He got to know Trump early in his career. I think Trump, I know Trump asked him to judge, is it a Miss Universe or Miss USA or Miss America contest? One of those.
Yeah.
Yeah. That Tom, of course, being single at the time, said, "Yeah, what time do you need me to be there?" and then he always felt that Trump was, very supportive of him, so he liked him personally, but I don't think he ever really considered the political ramifications of putting the MAGA hat in the locker. He should have. Tom's a bright guy. Kraft had known Trump, and in 2011, when Kraft's wife Myra passed away, Trump was there for Kraft. Kraft was a lifelong Democrat in the bluest of blue states. But after Myra Kraft died, Trump continually reached out to Kraft saying, "Hey, I'm coming up to do this with you. We're going to go there." He came to the funeral, the Jewish religion, said Shiva in the house, and Trump came up to pay a Shiva call to Kraft, and then called him every week for like a year. And Kraft said, "There just weren't very many people in my life that were doing that, and I'll never forget it." And so he became a really large donor to Trump's inauguration party in 2016 or January 2017. And their relationship was still pretty strong. Kraft used to joke that having Trump in the White House was like having a frat brother in the White House. I thought that was a pretty good line. But then January 6th turned around everything. And I don't believe they've spoken since then, unless it's recently. It definitely wasn't up to the time that I finished writing the book. I don't think anything has changed. Where Kraft just pulled back his support of Trump because of the January 6th insurrection. And again, I don't even know that he was fully in support of Trump's policies. Maybe some of them he was.
Right.
But he was supporting Trump as a person because he felt Trump supported him. Now, with Belichick, he wrote that letter to Trump before the 2016 election that Trump wound up asking him, "Can I read this at one of my campaign stops?" And Belichick says, "Well, can you give me a chance to rewrite it? I'd like to write a different letter." And Trump thought that Belichick was going to go back on his support. Instead, Belichick wrote an even stronger letter.
Wow.
And Trump wound up reading that the night before the 2016 election. But like you mentioned before, Nick, and I know it's a really long answer, but in 2000 and let me make sure I got my years right here. 21, January 6th to 21, when he was supposed to get the Presidential Medal of Freedom, a week, it was going to be a week after January 6th. And Bill had already decided that he wasn't going to accept it. It was causing, now the season was over for the Patriots.
The
guys were still hanging around. And McCourty, was talking to people in the hallway, whether they assistant coaches or people in the building, and says, "Anybody told Bill that this is such a bad look and the locker room is completely against him on this?" And they said no. So McCourty took it upon himself as a team leader to call Belichick. And they had a long talk, but Belichick told him early on, "Thanks for the call, but I've already decided not to accept this award." Now, I don't know what's happened with the Belichick-Trump relationship once he turned down receiving that award. I haven't. Trump was not at the North Carolina. He was not in Chapel Bill on Monday night to support him. Michael Jordan and Lawrence Taylor were there, and Mia Hamm was there, but Trump wasn't. So I don't know where that relationship stands right now. But if Trump had, if Belichick had accepted that award a week after, the attack on the Capitol, it might have been impossible for him to come back and coach in the 2021 season. Now, that's all hypothetical because that didn't happen.
Right.
But I think that would have caused such a problem in the locker room that guys might have refused to play for him.
I know it's hypotheticals. I just find it fascinating that because they didn't give him outward political support during his first term as president. But it is fascinating to me. Again, we go back to 2015. Brady has the MAGA hat in his locker. Kraft ended up becoming friends with him. Brady knew him for a long time. Belichick obviously had some sort of good relationship up to a certain point with him as well. So they were winning a lot. Just going back to my original question too, my original point was they were winning a lot. Again, they went to 3 straight Super Bowls, won 2 of them. And I know it kind of all came falling down in 2019. And then I guess 2020 was already after he left, but that's when Trump was running again, trying to get there for re-election. Did you get any sense that political affiliation or not, or just because that was in the air of the locker room or the air of the building within the organization, was that also a factor in that, like, hey, we need to separate and we're gonna have to do our own thing now to either fix some sort of off the field mess or just avoid this trifecta of a relationship that we have, Brady, Belichick, Kraft, with the president, where maybe the team doesn't like it, maybe we can't improve the team at that point. Was that ultimately part of the breakup as well going into 2020?
Well, I think by that point, Tom had divorced himself, at least he really tried to, from any association, affiliation with Trump.
Yeah.
And the only time we ever thought there was because he had that hat that he later explained, it wasn't like Trump sent it to him, Kraft sent it to him.
Yeah.
And so by 2020, that season, obviously Brady was gone. I think Belichick won a lot of points in the locker room by rejecting the opportunity to take the Presidential Medal of Freedom. And after January 6th, Kraft made it really clear that he was done with Trump. So going into the 2021 season, I think that had kind of resolved itself. Like I said before, Nick, if that didn't happen, if Belichick went ahead and accepted that award, I think there would have been major problems in New England.
Yeah, it could have been an absolute disaster. Gary Myers with me here on 3. A couple more for you, Gary. And again, I appreciate your time. Brady versus Belichick, the dynasty debate out on September 16th. Really looking forward to this one.
If I can just throw in there, anybody who's watching this now, if they want to pre-order it, it's available on Amazon or any of those online services that you like to use.
Absolutely, definitely going to be placing my pre-order as well. One of the other arguments for greatest of all time at quarterback is Joe Montana. If you don't pick Brady, people are probably going to pick a guy like Joe Montana. He's the I would say general consensus for the other guy if you're not going to pick Brady for most people. It's funny because he worked with an offensive coach in Bill Walsh for the majority of his career in San Francisco. He said he gave Bill Walsh 75% of the credit. That's what he told you. But when he goes to talk about Brady and Belichick, he goes, I would give Brady 60% of the credit over the coach. And I think his logical answer was, well, Bill's a defensive guy and Brady is a quarterback, so they're not always going to be in conjunction, or they're not always going to be working with each other 24 hours out of the day.
Right.
What did you make of that answer, considering what Brady has done on the field and the accomplishments alone put him above every other quarterback that's ever played the game? And I guess most people in modern day times will consider him the better quarterback than Montana. But if Montana is your pick as greatest of all time, I think it's a fascinating answer to hear.
Well, for a long time, Joe, in my mind, was the greatest of all time. There's a couple of things you have, and I think Joe and Tom are the same player, basically. Joe's a better athlete, but Tom's arm was probably a little bit stronger, but I think they both saw the game the same way.
Right.
But Joe also played during a time where quarterbacks didn't wear the red jersey. And I'm being sarcastic, obviously.
Yeah.
You can't hit quarterbacks anymore.
Yeah. He got hit a lot in practice.
Yeah. So Tom was able to just stand back there the last 5 or 6 years of his career and know if he got hit, there'd be a penalty flag. And if there was no flag, he screamed to the official and they'd throw the flag. He was known as one of the bigger whiners in the league. He also played during a period of time where defensive backs couldn't touch receivers.
Right.
I'm talking about Brady. Joe played during a period of time where Lawrence Taylor could knock the crap out of him and no flag. Where cornerbacks can mug the receivers, past the 5-yard bump zone, and there's no flag. So the passing game, all the rules have been designed to open up the passing game. I only have Brady first and Montana second because when you look at the big picture, and Tom won 7 Super Bowls and got to 10 of them, and Joe got to 4, and Joe got to 4 and won 4. I think Joe had 11 touchdowns and no interceptions in the Super Bowl. I would flip a coin if you tell me there's 2 minutes to go in a tie game or you're down by 5 and you got to go down and score a touchdown to win it. I'd flip a coin. I'd be very happy with either one of those.
Right.
There was again, I don't mean to contradict myself because I do have Brady first, and I based it on, he's got 3 more rings than him and he got to, 6 more Super Bowls. But there was something about Montana that was just really, really special. I don't know if it was his feet. He kind of moved around the pocket like a ballet dancer. He was so in tune with Bill Walsh in the West Coast passing game. He had Jerry Rice, the best receiver of all time. He was just so special. So I'll stay with Brady first. But again, if you told me I had the second pick in the draft and I was getting Joe Montana, I'd say thank you. I think Joe was that great. And there were, I get into a whole thing in the book about the relationship between Montana and Brady, and how, at least on Montana's part, there's some hard feelings because he felt Tom, he met with Tom early in his career. Joe still lives in the Bay Area. Tom is from the Bay Area. Joe was Tom's hero along with Steve Young growing up. And he met with Tom after he won, I think, either his first or second Super Bowl. And he felt like the only time Tom reached out to him afterwards was to say, hey, I broke another one of your records. And Joe doesn't care about records. He just cared about winning. And he would have been okay with Tom sending him those texts if he had texted him at other times as well.
Yeah.
He felt the only time he heard from Tom was when Tom was saying, well, that's another one, Joe. I just passed you. I got 5 Super Bowls. You had 4. And you had 11 touchdowns in the Super Bowl, and now I got, however many he had. But again, I really think different eras, same player.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think, I don't think you contradicted yourself. I think it was fascinating the fact that you had, Montana was, and this is how you put it in the book as well. Montana had Bill Walsh, who was considered the greatest innovator of offense in NFL history, if that's the way you go, and also the greatest receiver of all time, and Jerry Rice, among other Hall of Famers that he also played with. Compared to Brady, where same comparison, sort of Hall of Fame. One of the greatest coaches of all time, not the greatest head coach of all time, plus numerous other Hall of Famers around him. Maybe not in the same fashion, but again, different game, different eras, same quarterback. And just one happens to have more championships. So that is a fascinating look at it in terms of, who has more credit, coming from the other GOAT quarterback. Other guys who have casted their votes, you got former Jets coach Rex Ryan to come on to this as well. He gave the credit to Tom Brady because he was like, boy, I'd love to have a guy like that. But then you also quoted Vinny Testaverde, who played under Bill Belichick, and he actually credited Belichick more than he would Brady. I found that dynamic really intriguing, considering Testaverde's a player, play the same position, but he's like, yeah, the coach should get more credit. Then the former coach himself, who's also a defensive guy like Bill Belichick, was like, nah, give it to the quarterback. What was your take on those two guys giving you those opinions?
Well, I think Vinny was just, he played for Belichick in Cleveland. Belichick was on the staff with the Jets when Vinny had his best season in 1998, and then he played a little bit in New England, backing up Brady towards the end. And so he was with Belichick in 3 different spots. And I think that they just have a really tight relationship. Belichick was the reason that Parcells signed Vinny after he was let go. I think it was let go, it wasn't a trade, in 98 from Baltimore, because obviously Belichick had Vinny in Cleveland and really liked him. And Parcells had no connection to Testaverde. And so Belichick was the reason that he signed him. So I think Vinny's very loyal to Belichick. I think Rex is really loyal to himself, and he wasn't about to give Belichick credit because he thinks he's a better defensive coach than Belichick.
Right.
And Belichick's advantage was he had the greatest quarterback of all time, where Rex had Mark Sanchez and a whole. And he did a great job getting the Jets to the AFC Championship game in Sanchez's first 2 seasons. But it was Rex's defense that got him there. But I think Rex says, well, give me Brady, and let's see how many championships I can win, big boy. And so he's very apprehensive about giving Belichick the credit that you'd think another coach would.
Yeah,
it is. I hadn't really thought of it like the quarterbacks give the coach the credit, the coach gave the quarterback the credit. But I think Vinny is out of loyalty to Belichick. Not that he has anything against Brady, but and I just think that Rex, it would be an admission on his part that there was a coach that's better than him.
Yeah,
and he doesn't want to do that.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's amazing. These guys, the competitive nature never dies out. Always want to one up each other. I have two more for you.
Yeah, sure.
And this one came up in the middle of our conversation because just going back to that expectation versus appreciation. Brady trying to maybe one up Bill at a certain point where, hey, I won one without you. Now Brady is about to walk off almost into the sunset the year after he wins the Super Bowl in Tampa. They had that. No, they had another playoff run. They beat Philadelphia in the first round, and they nearly come back and beat the Rams. And I'm convinced to this day that if they beat the Rams in that second round on a miracle comeback, they probably run the table and perhaps beat Cincinnati in the Super Bowl. Then he walks off with 2 straight Super Bowl titles. But it seemed like, okay, he played and did.
Wait. You think Brady was walking away if he had won 2 in a row? Not
okay. All right. Good point. I'll concede that. It's like, you know what? Let's go for 3 in a row in Tampa. But he walked off the field where he left it all out in the field, and then they ultimately didn't get it done. But it's like, well, other than winning a Super Bowl as your last game, probably no better way to go out because you look like you're still in your prime. He did walk away, and then that pull brought him back, and then all his off the field stuff with his his divorce and obviously his family and whatnot. But was that year where he came back in 2022, where it's like we didn't expect him to come back, but he's like, you know what, I'm coming back out of retirement for one more year. Was there any part of him that at least in your opinion, when he comes back, he's like, you know what, I still need to try to do this one more time because I still need to prove that I can do this without Bill Belichick? I mean, I did, but I still need to keep doing it.
No, I don't. At that point, I think the Belichick stuff was he already done that. Mm-hmm. He already did that rather in his first year in Tampa. He didn't need to prove he can win without Belichick. He came back because he physically still felt really good. Mm. Like you said, Nick, they probably should have beaten the Rams. It was if I remember correctly, Todd Bowles went with a blitz and they threw a long pass. Yeah. Cooper Kupp setting up that winning field goal. Mm. They had come back from I think it was a deficit just about as much as it was in the Atlanta Super Bowl.
I'm pretty sure it was about 27 points or so. Yes.
Yeah, and they should have won that game. Mm-hmm. I mean, the Rams shouldn't have blown it, but once Tampa caught up, I thought for sure that they were going to win it. Mm-hmm. And then the next year he comes back, and truth be told, if Tom, with the benefit of hindsight, he probably made a mistake coming back that year. It was the first time in watching him play. Then I said, he really starting to look his age.
Yeah.
If he realized he was going to be sacked, he curled up in a ball on the field. He got rid of the ball a lot quicker than he had in the past because he didn't want to take a hit. Mm-hmm. They were 8-9. They won a really bad division, and then he played poorly, and the team played poorly against Dallas in the wild card round. And we knew that he was done because as he was walking off the field, his parents were waiting for him in the tunnel. And not that at that point anybody thought he was going to play one more year after that, but I know that his parents were there because they knew it was his last game.
Yeah.
Again, if he had to do it over again, I think you give him some truth serum. I think he would admit that coming back that last year, it wasn't necessary. But Nick, these guys are such competitors, and if they feel they can handle it physically. They know once they walk away, especially at that age, there's no way they're coming back. And if they feel they can still do it, the pull on it is just amazing. You've been doing it since junior high school, and you're used to the regimented way of living, and you like the team structure, and you like the competitive part of it, and you like being in the locker room with your teammates and the camaraderie, and everybody pulling together every Sunday. That's the part that they miss the guys more than they miss getting beat up on Sundays.
Of course.
That's like being in sleepaway camp for guys who are in their 20s and 30s, to be in a locker room every day with guys and doing practical jokes on each other and that kind of stuff. It's impossible to replicate that feeling in the post-football life, which is why it's so hard for so many players to give it up. A lot of them don't have a choice because they've been hurt or they get cut. Mm-hmm. But the great players, like Emmitt Smith played a couple extra years, but he was going for the record.
Yeah.
Jerry Rice. I mean, people even remember Jerry Rice played a year in Seattle.
Yeah.
He wound up in Denver with Mike Shanahan. And, I don't know if they phrased it, they cut him or he gets retired, but he didn't make it out of training camp in Denver. Mm-hmm. These guys can't walk away. And now with the money being so much more than it was in those days, boy, oh boy, it's hard. It's hard.
Yeah, they'll try to extend their careers as long as possible. And I mean, people almost forget that Jerry Rice scored a touchdown in the Super Bowl for the Raiders back in 2002,
Right.
which is kind of insane. So I'll leave you here with this one. It's a little bit more open ended here because I feel like you might not do it, I might not do it, but I feel like the debate between Brady and Belichick will rage on even with their different parts of their careers now, when it's not strictly Belichick coaching the Patriots and Brady playing quarterback for the Bucs. He's on Fox right now. He'll go into year 2. Now, wherever you think of him as a commentator, personally, I liked him, but it's year 1 jitters. He was obviously on the number 1 team, had the Super Bowl right away, so he's going to get criticized more than most, and especially with the contract he has with the network. So that's his career. It seems like if all goes well, he'll broadcast for 10 years, maybe keep broadcasting after that or walk away. Belichick, we don't know how much time he has left, but he obviously saw that pull to coach, whether it's the NFL, whether he ends up going back there, or he finishes out his coaching career at North Carolina. How do you see this unfolding over the next 5 or 10 years? And do you think, however Belichick's North Carolina career ends up and whether or not he goes back to the NFL, will that ultimately affect this Brady versus Belichick debate, considering Brady could have a lot of success off the field as a commentator where maybe he works his way into the hearts of people who used to hate him when he was a player?
Wow, that's a really interesting question. I see Tom sticking with the TV stuff for a bunch of years.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's not bad work, making $37 million a year to work 5 months, doing something that, he loves, studying tape and watching football games.
Mm-hmm.
They loosened up the restrictions a little bit on this year, so he'll be able to, at least I think, virtually take part in the production meetings. As far as Belichick and the NFL, think of it this way, Nick. He didn't get hired after he was fired in New England, when at that point nobody really questioned, whether the game had passed him by or whether he still had the fire to do it. He clearly still wanted to do it.
Yeah.
And nobody hired him. Then he sits out a year and gets no indication from any of the teams who might be looking for a head coach that they're going to even consider him. So he takes a college job. And now if the college job doesn't go well, and listen, I caution people, tap the brakes on Belichick being a bust in college and Arch Manning being overhyped. It's one game for both of them. I mean,
right.
Come on, let's give him a little bit of leeway here. But if this year doesn't go well, and again, I forget how many games these teams are playing now. It seems to get more and more like an NFL season.
Yeah. Right? 12-game regular season schedule, but who knows? If they make the playoff, it could be 15 or 16, right?
Okay. So if I give them a record of 3-9 and not making the playoffs, what NFL team is going to go after Belichick after 3-9 in college?
Right.
He's 2 years older than when he was fired by the Patriots, and people didn't want to hire him then. Now, I think it's foolish that he didn't get another shot at this, because general managers in place didn't want any part of him coming in the building because they were paranoid. Okay, Bill says, I just want to coach, but nobody believed him that once he got in the building that he was going to try to control things like he did in New England. So anybody in a general manager position was not going to recommend to the owner, let's hire Belichick. Sure, he's going to be after my job. And then there were owners that looked at him, and I know that like Dean Spanos was one of these, because Jimmy Johnson told me the story that Dean Spanos called him before they hired Harbaugh to ask him about Belichick, and Jimmy gave him the highest recommendation. Now, they're very good friends. You take that with a grain of salt. But Spanos said, well, how long is he going to coach? And basically Jimmy's argument was, what's the difference? If he can win for you in 3 years, isn't that all you're really after? I mean, if a guy doesn't win for you, you're going to fire him after 3 years. So if he wins for you and leaves after 3 years, aren't you better off? Yeah. So I just say, again, if he goes 10-2 at Carolina and they somehow make the playoffs, does he become more desirable to the NFL again? Absolutely. But again, I don't think what happened on Monday night is an indication that Belichick doesn't know how to coach anymore. I think it's just an indication that he took over a team, has 70 new players, and it's going to take him maybe half the season to figure it out. And I would judge him more on what happens next year than what happens this year. But that's not how fans are going to judge him. Yeah. Every Monday morning in the NFL, everything gets reset as if what happened 2 weeks ago didn't matter. It's only what happened the day before. And in college football, I'm getting the sense, based on the reaction to the first weekend, Arch Manning is going to be a great player. I blame Texas for making him sit for 2 years behind a quarterback who was drafted in the 7th round.
Yeah.
And then the opening game is at the defending national champions. I don't know when they scheduled that game. It must have been years ago, but I don't know how many quarterbacks would have gone in there and done much better than Arch did, considering Ohio State has a great defense. And now they have 3 easy games for him to kind of get into his rhythm before they start the SEC schedule. Mm-hmm. And that's when I think we can start really saying this guy is all that he was hyped up to be, or he's a Manning, and that's why they hyped him up and he can't live up to it. I just wouldn't judge him off of the first game at Ohio State, just like I'm not judging Belichick now. I think the tendency, and I think it's more true now than ever before, is we try to make long-term judgments based on short-term results. Mm-hmm. And 1 week is about as short-term as you can get.
Yeah, without a doubt. Brady versus Belichick, the Dynasty Debate, is out on September 16th. Be sure to get your pre-orders in now on Amazon or wherever you get your books. Or if you're waiting, don't wait too long. Get that book as soon as it comes out. Gary, I really appreciate your time. Fascinating conversation. I can't wait to dive in fully and read this book and whatever you're going to do in the future. And again, I think it's going to be a debate that unfortunately, maybe for the two of them, it's going to rage on for long after their careers are done in their respective fields. But it is a fascinating subject on a 20-year period where we might not see something like that again in the NFL in our lifetimes.
Well, Nick, I really appreciate your interest in having me on today.
Absolutely. Gary Myers, again, Brady versus Belichick, the Dynasty Debate, out on September 16th. Be sure to get that on Amazon or wherever you get your books. Pre-orders are out now. We'll see you next time.